Before we dive in, if you're listening to this and you've ever watched your child go completely quiet in your home language or wondered whether the summer trip actually makes a difference for their language development, this episode is for you. Hit follow on Spotify, Apple, or wherever your podcasting platform is, and make sure you don't miss out on what's to come. And if someone in your life needs to hear this conversation, send it to them. All right, let's go. Welcome back to Down Parenting. I'm Eva, and today we are joined once again by Mimi. Hello, Mimi.
Hi, thank you for having me. So nice to be here.
She is our multilingualism specialist and someone who I think approaches this topic in a way I have never heard before, and neither of you, I'm sure. Not about the top down and not about here's the research, this is what you must do, but it's from the inside experience. She is a multilingual parent herself, someone who works with families, and someone who I just think really gets why this stuff is emotionally loaded, not just logistically complicated. So we're recording this as summer is approaching, which means many of you, myself included, are about to get on trains, planes, and into cars to visit our families. And that trip carries a lot of hopes and a lot of anxiety when it comes to language. So Mimi, from a language perspective, is this actually a big deal, or is it just something parents tend to over or underestimate?
So, during the school year, the dominant language, which is very often the language of school, friends, social relationships, and basically everything outside your door, has a constant gravity to it. It pulls your child into its orbit, if you will. So the home language, however loved and well supported, it's often much quieter in comparison and often has to fight for space. What happens during the summertime, though, it's that it kind of changes, the roles flip, and suddenly the home language isn't the minority language. It's on you hear it on the street, in the shops, at the dinner table with family members who don't speak anything else. Thankfully, I would say. And the roles have flipped. And research shows that spending time in the country where the language is spoken can have a very significant and very positive impact on heritage language development. So yes, summer creates a real window, and it's up to us to do something with it.
So what do some parents get wrong when they're actually in that window?
I think a lot of parents don't stop to think about it, to think about what they can do during this time. Very often they see their child pulling back, perhaps responding in the wrong language, or very often, and I know this from personal experience, going completely quiet, asking them to talk on their behalf. Like if they're asked something, they just kind of cower and pull themselves in the background and kind of say, okay, elbow you and okay, you say it. So what parents often do is they don't go to find out what's underneath in a way that works for the child, of course. I saw this, as I said, I know this from personal experience, and I saw this with my son last summer. So he's 11 now. He was 10 last year. He's a very sensitive child and rather self-critical. So when he arrived in Bulgaria, so I spent a long time caring for my mom, and he came after school ended. And when he arrived, he started pulling back. And I have to say his home language skills, Bulgarian language skills, are very good. But he started to pull back. He was quieter than usual and pulling himself to the sidelines when we were in a group. And I kept noticing, kept checking in, and I kept asking questions. And at one point, he said to me, I'm not very good. He said, I feel stupid because the people around me are so much better. And in a situation like this, perhaps a lot of parents would go and dismiss that, saying, oh, you'll be fine. Like you have to try more. You have to try and get out of your shell and so on and so forth. Or perhaps they'll panic and not, I wouldn't say push, but wouldn't encourage them to try more in a way that works for the child, because pushing them and encouraging them in a way that works for their child are two very different things sometimes. And neither of those things help. So what my son needed, and this is my personal experience again, In that moment wasn't a correction, wasn't me pushing him. He just needed to be heard, to feel that he has space to think about how he feels, to express how he feels. And we talked about feelings before in one of our previous episodes. And in situations like this, ability to talk about feelings, they come super handy. And if people, just a small detour, but if people haven't listened to this episode, please go back and listen to it because it's so very important. But coming back to this example, what my son needed in this moment was to be heard and to be given a different perspective. And when we do that, we start with helping children become aware of their own multilingual experience.
So you've used the word awareness. I want to stay with that for a second. What do you actually mean by that? Because it sounds simple, but I don't think it is. So can you just elaborate a little bit on that?
The awareness bit, absolutely. The awareness bit is something that I personally feel really, really strongly about because I feel and I see that it doesn't get enough attention. So the reason my son and I were able to have that conversation is because we'd been building a habit for a very long time of actually talking about his languages. And I've mentioned this a number of times throughout the episodes that we've done together, how important it is to talk to your children about anything and everything that has to do with their languages and why they're growing up the way that they are. And building a habit of having those conversations definitely helps in situations like this because you make their languages something discussable, something that they are used to talking about. You're making their languages something that is theirs rather than something that just happens to them, sort of, because they were born in this environment. And those are two very different things because languages are a part of them. They don't just learn their languages, the languages always shape them as they go through the experience of developing them. So the awareness that they build around their own languages, things like talking and thinking about, for example, what feels hard for them, what's difficult, what's easy, what they are particularly proud of, or perhaps ashamed of, what worries them, what they don't want to do, like our constant discussion about heritage language school. Is this a good thing? Why? And so on. So this is one of the greatest gifts that you can give your children, along with passing on your languages to them, in my opinion. And it starts with very simple questions that you can ask them. Things like, how did it feel speaking your language today? Was there a moment that felt easier? What was difficult? Why? What did you notice? So we had all those conversations a number of times last year. And it's by no means a language lesson. It's helping them build a relationship with their languages. And for parents whose child can actually say, I feel stupid, like my son said, it's, to me, this is a blessing because he can connect to his feelings about the languages and he can express it. And we can build on this. We can work on this rather than say, I don't know, whatever. I don't want to talk about it, or I don't want to, whatever. I don't want to deal with it because it's easier. It's a lot harder to say, I feel stupid. I feel less than the people around me because they're so much better than me. And I need to say, not every multilingual child struggles in the same way. So every parent knows their children best, and every parent can figure out for themselves how they can approach their children in the best way. But my daughter, for example, her story is very, very different. Yes, she is younger. She was 6 years old last year, but she's been a passive bilingual. And yes, I'm a linguist, I'm a multilingualism expert, but still, my daughter is a passive bilingual, goes to show you. It depends on the environment and it depends on how they are raised. And she understood a huge amount of Bulgarian throughout her life, but she rarely used to speak it. And it's a long story how this came to be. So it's not, I don't want to get off track here. But last summer, something started to shift for her as well.
So, can I go back to when you were talking about your son and how he said he felt stupid? Can you actually explain how did you deal with it? Like, what were you talking about?
Um, what I did is I reminded him of what he actually has, because it's so easy to lose track of the big picture when they're in an environment like this, when the home language suddenly takes over, when the roles are reversed, and they're so overwhelmed by the amount of exposure and the level of language that they're exposed to, that they freeze to cope with this in a way. So I reminded him that what he has, that he has Dutch, that he has English, that the friends and family and cousins and whoever he was exposed to, that they don't speak Dutch, and majority of them don't speak English to the level that he does. And the fact that he moves through three languages every single day. And it's not the fact that he's multilingual is not a deficit because his Bulgarian is lacking, but rather it's a set of skills that most people around him don't have. And because of how his brain works and how his languages interact with each other, he cannot be, well, he shouldn't be expected to act like a monolingual child and be on the same level as his cousins, because he has a lot more that works for him. And his brain literally works in a different way. His operating system in his mind works in a different way. And I believe those are hidden gems that we can give our children. And again, those are the things that we need to talk to them about so they can appreciate what they have. And those are the things that are genuinely a child's own things that they can't see because they're so busy measuring themselves against whatever they see. And especially when you have a cousin or somebody who says, "Oh, how come you speak so funny?" Or "How come you don't sound like he does? You know, you're the same age." Or, you know, "He's younger than you. He speaks better than you do." And this is the kind of flip that we need to offer them, because this is the truth. Their mind works differently, and they shouldn't be expected to have the same level that the cousin or whoever else has. But again, this is not a miracle solution. This takes time, because when you say it to them, it's not that they realize it right away and they're like, "Oh, okay, that's it," and everything flips. It takes a while, takes different amount of time for every child. But gradually, in my case, he relaxed. It took a while. It took more than a week. But then again, we'd been talking about those things for quite some time. But for him, he relaxed after a while, started talking more, and stopped measuring himself against the other ones as much. I can imagine that his mind was still working, but he relaxed and he opened up and started speaking more. And a shift like this doesn't come from pressure. It doesn't come from telling him, "Okay, whatever, get over it and just start speaking. I know you can do it." Because when you say that and they still feel some sort of inhibition, they might even feel that they're disappointing you because you say, "Oh, I know you can do it," but then they can't because of whatever is going on in their mind. And it adds more pressure.
So let's talk about the children who are mostly silent in their home language. Parents might recognize this: the child who understands everything but is constantly answering in, I guess, what's considered the wrong language or the different language. Can you explain what's actually going on here? And should parents be worried, or is this a natural thing?
As I mentioned, I have this on my hands with my daughter. She's now 7 years old, and two very different children, sort of fed not quite the same amount of language, but raised in very different circumstances. And so for her, my daughter, she's a passive bilingual, and this basically means a child who has a pretty good or even great receptive understanding of a language. So they would understand almost everything that you say to them, but they would never speak or rarely would speak. And the most important thing to understand about those such children is that it's almost never about the ability. And they're not doing it on purpose. They're not doing it to annoy you or um, whatever negative connotation somebody can come up with to connect with this. What's often missing is motivation in those cases. It's confidence, missing confidence, or very often a compelling reason to take the risk of speaking. To put it bluntly, something to make it worth their while. Because children wouldn't do it because they're lazy. They would do it because they're smart. If you don't feel confident expressing yourself in a language and you know that people understand you when you express yourself in another language, why bother? Parents sometimes think that the children would speak because it means so much to one of the parents, or they love their family and then this would be the reason why they start speaking. And sometimes it is. I'm not saying this is absolutely not possible, but that's not the universal reasoning. And we need to also remember that children experience everything through the lens of their own immediate needs. They're self-centered like this. And it's not because they're selfish, it's just because how they work, because they are wired to get their needs met, to connect with their caregivers, to get their needs met. So for the motivation to land, it needs to be personal for them. It needs to offer the child something that they actually want to be connection, pride, access to something, a real need. Like if grandma comes to visit or I go to visit her and grandma wants to go for ice cream with me and it's asking me what kind of flavors I like. And my grandma doesn't speak any other language. Of course, I'm going to communicate with her and tell her everything in this language, regardless how difficult it is, because I want that ice cream. So this is a real need for them, isn't it?
Well, yeah, I was actually going to ask because we have spoken about the ice cream and the nanas before about our kids connecting that way. Can you give us any other practical tips? What are some things parents can actually do this summer to help our children that way to benefit from speaking their, well, native tongue or their not so native tongue?
Well, there are a couple of things that are fairly easy, I would say. I would say consistency over intensity, because there is a big difference between the language being present every day in a low pressure kind of way and having big language pushes that everyone dreads. Small, regular, always do the trick. Something that you share, something that you do together, or going for a walk with grandma, with the uncle, with a family friend in the home language, but every day. This consistency aspect of it. So also they can build a little bit of a habit and connection so they're able to relax as well. And if your child thrives on routine, many children do, we can try and build it into the rhythm of whatever our plans are during the holiday. Another thing is, as I said before, creating genuine need for your child to speak it. And this can be the biggest motivator for them. And if there are family members who only speak the home language, especially elderly people, because this is often the case with them, those relationships can be really great for this kind of exercise. And not because you make them to feel forced in a way, but because they give the child something real, a reason to speak and a relationship that would reward the effort. One thing that I keep repeating, and it's absolutely valid in this case as well, is following their interest. When you go there, often, for example, day camps or play groups, depending on your child's age, different activities that you can sign up your child for, being football, drawing, whatever it is. Find the version of it or find something that works for your child where you are and sign them up. Some books that your child likes, go to the library or to the local bookshop and find something that matches your child's interests, and when you're there, you have so many more options to choose from rather than when you are home. And when the language carries something that they want, it stops being something that they must do or they have to align with somehow and starts being a door to something else, to something really good. And then things slowly start to shift. And another one is something that I often mention, again, following their interests and not your agenda, not what you think might be interesting for them, because those are always two different things. And it could be like a drawing class or any other hobby related class, or be it a day camp, anything that is offered in the home language where you are on site. There's a lot more things to choose from. Go to the library, go to a bookstore, look for some books that your child likes, or topics that they're interested in. You can find materials in the home language on site. Again, I'm repeating myself, but there are so many more options when you're there. So it's good to choose a couple of things, and then they can also meet some children their age, and creating social contacts is always a fantastic thing. This is something that my son misses, for example, often, the kind of friends that he has here where we live. So signing them for classes or something like this, it's always a good idea to meet kids. This is when the language starts carrying something that they want, something that they can really connect with. And it's not an obligation anymore. It's not something that they need to do, and something they kind of do because they want to, because they connect with the topics, the people, and then things slowly start to shift.
What about the parents who feel like we've actually tried all of this and it's still not working? What do you want to say to them?
I would like to tell them that it's a process and it's not a product that you end up with at some point, because what you're building towards doesn't always show up immediately. Your child may potentially will still respond in the wrong language. They may have a week or more of pulling back before they gradually start to open up, just like my son did. But this is the process. Again, this is not something that they're trying and failing at, or you are trying and failing at. It's a process. It takes time. For some children, longer. For other children, not as long. There's so many things that play a role during the process. So what you're doing is, every time you show up in the language, every time you keep the door open without forcing it, you are helping build a relationship between your child and the language. I really would like to believe that this is a part of them that they haven't really claimed yet fully. And there is still so much potential. So you are holding their hand and helping them build this connection, claiming this part. And your job is to help them see it and to trust that it will happen. Because again, it's easier for some children, more difficult for others. And every child needs to take their own time to get there. So keep supporting them.
Well, Mimi, thank you so much for joining us again. So, as you're packing your bags in your mind, or booking those day trips, or just finding the local water park, I hope the phrase Mimi used will stay with you. Those hidden gems, the things our children already have that they just can't see because they're just too busy measuring themselves against the one thing that they're less sure of. And I think that applies to us as parents too. We spend so much time measuring against the thing that isn't there yet, the fluency, the confidence, the moment it all clicks, that we miss what we're actually building every single day. The door we keep open, the language we keep showing up in, even when they answer in a different one. And it's not failure, it's a process. As always, Mimi's details are in the show notes, and if this episode landed for you, please do share it. Forward it to another multilingual parent, put it in your group chats, because that's how more families find out about it, and that's how they get supported. And you are not alone.